Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I am Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. Now that the 2025 NHL Entry Draft is done, we've already begun recording our summer content. We'll be bringing you as much information as we can about each of the 9 players selected by the Kings at the draft. Today, which is July 9th, we sat down and we recorded with Mark Yannetti. We asked him about all 9 of those players, and when we were done, I asked Mark if he would stick around what I thought would be about 5 minutes for some general questions about the process and anything else that might come up. He was gracious enough to oblige, as he always is, so here's that portion of the conversation. It's a little longer than 5 minutes. Starting this coming Monday, we'll be bringing you those conversations about the players. We'll start with Henry Brustevich. We've got Mark Yannetti. We've got Scott Wheeler to talk about his view of the players, and then we'll be getting somebody from each of the teams that the players come from. It's a format we've used in the past. We'll be looking at the free agents too, and hopefully, if everything works out, that should take us, we'll be bringing you 2 episodes every week through July and August, and hopefully that'll bring us right up to about rookie camp. So that's the plan. Things may change. You never know. Obviously, there will be other news that might break, and if it does, we'll bring you that. But for now, that's the plan. Hope you enjoy it, and here's our conversation with Mark Yannetti. Joining us right now, Director of Amateur Scouting, Mark Yannetti. How are you doing today, Mark?
Good.
And featuring Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
Jesse, great to be back.
And Mark, the first question I want to ask you about the overall draft, 2025 NHL Entry Draft, is going into it. And now, maybe I had just gotten used to, the recent trend, and in our conversations about the draft, I mentioned confirmation bias and how I'm guilty of it, as any people. And when I look at Twitter and I see fans' reactions, one of the things that bugs me the most is something only has to happen twice before people start talking about it as if it always happens. So last year, you guys came away with 4 players, and the year before that, you came away with 5 players, and there was a lot of moving around of extra picks. And so this year going into it, I was like, oh, sure, they've got 7 picks, but they'll come out of it with 4 or 5, maybe, whatever. You come away with 9. Going into the draft, how likely was it in your mind that you'd come out with 9? I mean, you more than doubled your prospect pool in a day.
I thought I had a high level of confidence that we were going to move back from 24. It was a little different than last year's situation with Montreal because we made that deal before the draft. That was a little riskier last year. But I had a high level of confidence that we were going to pick up one more pick. I wasn't, picking up the Spence thing and then flipping it, but still getting a pick. I would not have expected 9. I would expect to pick up one more pick, but then I thought we would move 59 and another pick to go down. So I thought it would mimic last year a little bit more than it did. As I said, we moved up to get Woolley. We traded a 6th and a 7th to get up higher. I would have thought, we traded back to get 50. I would have thought we would have traded back to get 59 and then up to get 45 or 48, or in the 45 to 48 range, and we just couldn't. So that's where it differed. And then once it differed like that, then we're like, okay, let's pick up picks, give ourselves, the more picks you have, the more chance you have to hit.
We were talking to Scott Wheeler, going through all 9 picks, and when we got into the 6th and 7th round, a thought occurred to me, and I tossed it at him, and I'll toss it at you now. Now that there are 32 teams, and we might be talking about 33 or 34 teams in the not too distant future, and undrafted players make the league, I don't know what the percentage rate is, but I suspect it's probably about the same as 7th round picks, 6th round picks. is it time maybe to shrink the draft? Maybe go 5 rounds, 4 rounds?
You're gonna see a problem with the salary cap if you do that. You know what? There's a lot of teams that will like that. I think not. I think the 4th to 7th round rewards the team that do the best and most work.
Is that not true though of teams with undrafted players? I mean, the Kings in particular have acquired a number of undrafted players in recent years, and you've talked about them as being the same as draft cap.
Yes, the only difference being, we have a pretty good presentation. Teddy Belisle did, and I worked on with him. He would have probably been the driver, and I would have been the secondary guy on it. And it's pretty profound, and I won't give it away because it's so profound. But you can throw a lot of darts at a lot of undrafted players just with money, and you can sign 20 college, junior, or European free agents and have 3 make it, and you've had 3 make it, or you can sign 4 and have 3 make it. I think the undrafted player thing. I think you can shoot with a shotgun there and get good results if you don't care about money and you don't care about process and you don't care if 10 of the guys you draft have no chance to make, or 10 of the guys you sign have no chance to make it. So I don't love that process. I don't think I don't think a team signing 20 free agents in a 7-year span or a 10-year span is good for the player. Yeah, I mean, he gets a signing bonus, but they're doing it knowing that 75 to 90% of the guys aren't going to play. We do it knowing that 85 to 90% of the guys are going to play. So I don't love that as much. I like the fact that the draft is. I'd rather the draft be 10 rounds. I would. I mean, we've done very well in the 7th round.
Yeah, it's true.
As I said, it's not an accident. It's not circumstance. It's not luck. It's having a dedicated development staff. It's having dedicated scouts. It's having a GM put the right process in. I mean, there's so many things that go into, once you get past the 3rd round, there's so many things that go into a player making it that have nothing to do with the pick. The amateur staff picks them. Great. You get in. You got to give the guy, Michael Conley said, you got to give the guy the right piece of clay. We got to hand off the right piece of clay to the development staff, to the next people who are going to be it. And then they have to do the right thing with it. And then they have to be they hand it off 4 or 5 times before they get to the NHL. So, for me, getting rid of the 4th to 7th round, rewards incompetence and apathy. I probably shouldn't say that, but as I said, and you know what? And it rewards not wanting to do the right thing. It rewards not wanting to. You know what? It's a joke that we have a 7-day development camp. Probably shouldn't say that, but the NFL's got 3 mandatory mini camps where you can pay guys to go there. Like the NHL, like the NFL is actively developing and it's paying you to develop. So anything there, I said, I'd want the draft to be 10 rounds. I can tell you we could have found 2 other guys. I bet you we could have found 2 other guys. They might not make it. As I said, 10 rounds. If you're talking about success rates, it's going to be extremely low. But I like our chances with low odds. I like what our organization does with those late guys. I do. So I would be against it.
Fair enough. The name Andy has come up a few times in our conversations about the 9 players you drafted. I'm assuming you're talking about Andy Johnson. And his name first reached my ears and got on my radar when it came to the Hampton Slokinski pick. And there was a conversation we had about the players drafted this year that seemed to follow a very similar tone as the Hampton Slakinski pick, in that maybe the player was a little bit under the radar. Maybe, you said he went to prep school. So how valuable is it having scouts like Andy Johnson who are able to go and find the under the radar guys, whether it's Jared Woolley, and I understand that wouldn't have been Andy Johnson, but Hampton Slakinski, Jared Woolley, maybe Caden Harrington, guys that maybe just don't fit the conventional path of other prospects?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, the GM is the face, and he gets the credit or the blame for a lot of things he shouldn't get the credit or the blame for. It's easy. I like talking about Dean because it's done. It's an era that's over. I like talking about it because all of it's done. It's not something that's current. There's no old wounds we're opening up. My relationship with him is rock solid. I can be critical, and I can heap praise on Dean, and the fact Dean won 2 cups. Like, it makes it easy to talk about the harder stuff. So that's why I kind of gravitate back to that. But if you look at these things, these scouts, as I said, so Dean would get credit or blame for things that he shouldn't. It's the same thing falls on me. Like, these guys are doing such a good job. Like, I could name a player in every draft. Like go back to LaFerriere. I mean, Ted Belisle he created a new scouting term because Bernie and I were not on board early with LaFerriere. So he was there were some negative things that Chris Byrne and I were saying. I won't say what, but he created a made up scouting category to put negative things that were only a little negative in. So that's how much he liked the player. Like, he's directing the narrative. So it's important. No, as I said, it's important. As I said, you can't overstate how important it is for Teddy and Andy to find Slakinski. Now, as I said, they still have to get by me. They still have, as I said, Ferrier gets on the list. At the end of the day, it's, I can win or lose a debate. I'm good at that. But at the end of the day, a guy gets on the list because I put him on the list, But as I said, you've got, I said Tony Gasparini earlier with Nick Dowd. You've got, Ron Payette and Stefan Vigier with Zimmer. Brian Denny and even, maybe even a little bit more Chris Byrne with Jared Woolley. Every single draft, there's, as I said, if you're picking in the first round, you're all dealing with the same information. In the second round, it's lesser, but again, everybody's dealing with the same information. The third round, and then it gets exponentially different, the information you get. But the guys you get there are because somebody noticed something, saw something, relayed something that somebody else might not have seen. It might only be one player in a draft, but they said you can't overstate how important those guys are.
I want to drill down on the category that you mentioned that Teddy invented about negatives that aren't that negative on Alex LaFerriere. And the reason I want to do it, and I talk to Hoven about this all the time, there are things that I have opinions about that I don't care about. And I try to explain that to people, saying like, yeah, I don't believe, and I genuinely don't believe that people like raw avocado. But at the end of the day, I don't care if they do or don't. And if people tell me that they do, I'm perfectly happy to walk away from that and think, okay, that's fine. But I'll never believe it. But it doesn't impact my life in any way, shape, or form. It's just a goofy belief I have. And I know it's funny to sort of make public declarations about because it gets people upset and then it turns into a 5-minute conversation. But at the end of the day, I don't care. If you like avocado, you like avocado. I just don't believe you. So what is an example of like a negative attribute that a player might have that isn't that negative? Because Alex LaFerriere obviously is about to get a second contract that'll pay him very well, and he's proven himself as an NHL player. So whatever negatives might have been in his profile, they're obviously not holding him back.
No, as I said, so LaFerriere is a special case. He ended up as I said, I've talked about this a little bit. People have no idea where a guy on your list, you might have a guy on your list 20 and you get him at 70. The subjectivity of all the teams' lists it surprises even me, and I know it. And each year, as I said, I hear people say, I don't understand why they say it, but every year someone says we had this guy at 5 on our list and we got him at 92. Well, that's bad. That's bad. That's doing the job wrong. That means you waited. You go up and get him, trade for him, trade up for him. So as I said, I'm not going to tell you where LaFerriere was on our list, but if you think LaFerriere was in the 3rd round on our list, you're crazy. So what ends up happening as I said, if this doesn't happen with all players, it happens with our 1st round pick. They get microanalyzed. The tier of players. Let's just say there were 7 players in 2 tiers for our 1st round pick this year. The amount of work and micro work and detail work, in addition to the extensive live scouting for those players, was extraordinary. So each year there'll be some similar players like that, like LaFerriere, like Teddy wanted him. We put together the list, and he was a little bit lower than Teddy, and Tony to a lesser degree wanted him. So guys are allowed to make cases on a not on a macro level, but guys are allowed to make cases. And that's the player he brought to us. And so he brings it to me and Chris Byrne, and we're Byrne's the devil's advocate. I'm always the negative. It's just how it works. And so it's prove it to me. So we had all these special projects and assignments where Teddy and Tony had to prove that LaFerriere was in the wrong spot. And they won round 1, they run round 2, and then in round 3, they run into a wall. And again, he's moving up each time, and they said they can't get through the wall, so they just create an end around the category that we never had. We have positive and negative in a certain category, and they come up with a neutral category. He had these many, so instead of having 27 negative plays in this category, he only had 7 negative plays, and he had 20 neutral plays. All right. So that's the extent that they'll go when they feel something like this. And it's not just, that's one instance. That's the extent that our scouts will go to, as I said, they feel strongly about something. Payet does it to me all the time. He does it more through conversation and debate, but he and Sinclair kind of do it similarly, where they'll kind of test the waters, and then they'll kind of present something. And it might be an hour or 2 hour long conversation, but they kind of steer it that way. So there's a various amount of ways the guys do it, but that's the extent that these guys will go when they feel strongly about something.
I just have to chime in because you brought up one of my favorite points, which is when people bring up like, oh, I can't believe this guy fell to the 5th round. I can't believe 31 teams passed. Like 31 teams didn't pass on this guy. 32 teams passed on that guy, including the team that picked them. And it's like, well, yeah, if you knew this guy was going to be as good as he was, you wouldn't have picked him in the 5th round. You would have picked him with your 3rd round pick, or you would have traded up to make sure that you got this guy way earlier. So it's like people do it all the time in like the public sphere. And I'm glad that you touched on it, because it's always been one of my biggest like pet peeves. Like the team that you're giving credit for passing this guy 4 times, and no one ever acknowledges that. It's true,
100%. And again, that's why I don't understand why teams will say like way back. Toronto said they had Stan at 3 on their list, or I don't want to say, but they said they had him like 3 or 4 on there. We would have taken him 3. Why say that you just waited? But I respect strategic. I respect strategic selection. And we've done it, and we've got burned on it too. We knew that no one knew who Simmons was, so we let a guy who was behind Simmons on the list. It's easy to go back and look. It was Oscar Moeller. We took Moeller ahead of Simmons because we thought that Moeller might go in the next 8 picks, and we were, between Mike and I, we were 100% sure that Simmons wouldn't. So the only way we thought we could get both, or to take the chance out, was to skip over Simmons. But again, we're talking about, I think it was 53 to 61 or 54 to 60. It was in that area. We're not talking about the second round or the fifth round. Like now you're just, it's just luck of the draw. Like, so as I said, strategic, I respect, but when you got a guy, at 10 on your list and you get him in the fifth round and you're like, oh, we can't believe, and then you say you had him at 10, like, or 14, it was 14 this year, I think is what they said. I don't know what, I mean, even if you wait till the third round, you're waiting 90 picks. That's gambling. There's no, I don't know. As I said, right or wrong, we've moved up 2 spots to get to Foley. We moved up 3 spots to get Faber. These are guys that were, like they said, I won't say where they were. Foley was high on our list. Faber was high on our list. We didn't want to let it go 3 spots, forget 3 rounds. And we've been burned on it too. We moved up for Zikov. I would rather have those picks back now. But as I said, if you got a guy high in your list, you do everything you can to get him. Now, sometimes you can't. I mean, as I said, we tried to move up from 59. We tried to move up 7 times. Really 6 times. So the one was a pipe dream, but we asked anyway. So there were really 6 legitimate offers to try to move up from 59. They were all rebuffed. So there were 3 guys we really wanted to get that we couldn't get. But if they were still there at 70, we would have been able to get them. So I don't know. It's philosophy too. And as I said, that's just how I feel about it.
I don't understand poker on any really important level, but whenever a player so successfully pulls off a bluff and then shows their cards, that never makes any sense to me, because it seems like you're just revealing your strategy to somebody you just beat with that strategy. Is there an element of that to not telling the world, hey, we had this guy 10? Like, I understand the impulse to say, hey, ha, 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 we're so smart. But aren't you also telling everybody, A, how smart you think you are, and B, what you value, how you value it, where, and maybe also revealing that you're not as smart as you think you are?
That's the thing, right? If you have to tell people how smart you are, again, I got 3 analytics guys. I got 5 analytics guys. Like, they're all brilliant. Like, I got Hayden Speak and Paul Marino and Rob Volman. Everybody knows who Rob Volman is, so that's easy. I don't have to talk about him. But the other 2 guys don't. The other 2 guys walk in a room. They don't have to tell anybody how smart they are. Like, everybody knows. They're brilliant. Like Volman's written like 6-7 books. He doesn't have to tell anybody else.
I've got a bunch of them on my bedside table. I haven't even cracked them yet.
No, so like I said, I don't like to reveal things that we're doing. That's why I feel comfortable talking about the past. The Dean errors are the easiest to talk about, because our stuff is either evolved or is no longer in use. So we can talk about it. Anybody wants to take that stuff, it's 20 years ago. It's, but I don't know. Like the people that talk about the analytics they're using, and either you're ahead of the curve and you've just given people a glimpse of what you're doing so they can catch up, or you're behind the curve, in which case you just told people that you're stupid and you think you're smart. I don't see the benefit of that. I like to give people a glimpse of what happens and more in depth into the process of what happens. But in terms of proprietary stuff, I don't know why you would release that.
I'm going to ask a question about the analytics guys, and I'm going to go on a hike to ask it. So buckle up, and I apologize in advance. When I was a kid, I was terrified of roller coasters. And, I would go to Magic Mountain with my friends, and I can't remember how old I was, probably like 5th grade or something like that. And we would go to Magic Mountain, we'd run around, we'd stand in line waiting for the roller coaster. And then we got to the part where you get on the ride. I'd say like, all right, I'm going to go stand at the exit and wait for you guys, because I was scared. And I finally got tired of missing out on the fun. It seemed like my friends were having a lot of fun. And I was like, I got to figure out a way to get over this, because this is silly. And what I finally did, and I talked myself into it, and it works on flights and everything else that I've been scared of in my life, is I realized somebody gets paid a lot of money to make sure that this doesn't break down and kill people. And I don't need to know how much time goes into it. I don't need to know how they make sure that it doesn't break down. All I need to know is that this is a business model that works on consistency and repetition. And if it didn't work, it wouldn't be allowed to operate. and I wouldn't even have the opportunity to be scared of it because it wouldn't exist. Someone would have died, and that would have been the end of that. So then I started riding roller coasters, and now I love them, and I totally get it. And same with flights, and I haven't gone skydiving yet, but I imagine it's the same thing. When the Kings announced that they were switching logos, and we sat down and we got walked through the process of how the logo was designed, it was way more information than I never needed to know. I just needed to know, okay, well, what does the logo look like when it's done? But then you start realizing how much work went into font, drop shadows. I didn't even know what a drop shadow was. Motion lines, how many of them? What are they shaped like? Where does the drop shadow go to create the effect of, motion in the viewer's eyes? How does the crown have to be shaped in order to make sure that it is, mass produced across multiple, like all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's the same thing, right? That roller coaster, engineering, safety protocols, etc. Tons of work went into making sure that people could get on that roller coaster and ride it 1,000 times a day, day after day after day. Logos get made. And even though I don't know the first thing about graphic design, but knowing that there are armies of people devoted to making sure that there are standards that are applied and, repeatable and consistent, it makes me comfortable. And I like knowing that the organization spends that much time. So that's the hike. The question is knowing that the analytics staff is part of the draft process, and knowing how smart those guys, and knowing that the process is way more complicated than any of us will ever know, partially because we're too dumb to follow, and partially because you guys are protective of it. And I get that. Now that I've gone on the hike, I've forgotten where I was going. How much input does an analytics staff have on making your draft list, given that their analytics are designed to measure presumably NHL output? And you're talking about 17-year-old kids who are playing in the USHL, the OHL, the QMJHL, the WHL, NCAA, Liga, Junior Liga, leagues just across the world with different levels of competition. It must be daunting, which I suppose there's never like a day one where you start, okay, today's the day we start prep for 2026. You're just constantly intaking information. But how much influence does the analytics team have? How are they, woven in with the scouting staff, and what's the interplay between those different groups without revealing too many state secrets? I realize that's a big question.
They would have 100% input and say in all the picks that haven't made it.
Okay.
How's that for you guys, analytics guys? No, that was just a shot at them. They might as well deal with some of the anxiety I get to deal with. No, the truth is it varies in terms of the list or in terms of the process. In terms of the draft day or the 2-day draft process, they are heavily involved and influential in what we do. Our movement scenarios are based on thousands of iterations of drafts, of previous drafts, of mock drafts, of lists, of public lists, of private lists. So in terms of the decision to move back last year or this year, they're heavily involved. And they're heavily involved in saying where I can move back to. And where we can't move back to. What is a good return? What is a poor return? Now, as I said, in terms of those 2 times of moving back, that aligns with my thinking. It aligns with how I like to do it. It aligns with what my philosophy and my beliefs. So they get used even more because they're providing me also with what I want to do. So there's a readiness to accept it. But as I said, they are front and center in terms of those things. Now, at the same time, the analytics themselves would have told you not to move up for Jared Woolley. A 6th-round pick and a 7th-round pick to move up higher in the 6th is not, you're not getting back commensurate value. You're giving up too much. So they give me that information, and then I say to them, okay, I get it, but this is a different scenario, or this is a player that, based on his position on our list, he's not a 6th-round pick. And then there's some discourse, but as I said, they give me their thoughts, and then I might overrule it there. So they're still involved, but where they might get 100% acceptance in one area, they might just, I listen, I agree, I understand I'm making the wrong choice in terms of a strictly analytic thing in a vacuum, because it's in a vacuum that it happens. I'm still going to do it. And then I said, I believe with the work they do, I owe them an explanation for why I went against them. Same thing if I'm going to go against the scout or whatever. I think everything needs to be explained to everyone. So as I said, I'm going against you guys on this. They like the Woolley pick. They just don't. The analytics tell you not to move that pick for those two picks for that pick because you're going to lose value. They understand that it's different in the real world because after Woolley, our list fell apart and you're picking 17 or 20 players. So there's nuance that goes into it. So that's where they have the biggest influence. In terms of the list, they have more influence in certain areas than others. As I said, they rely on information. The information you get from the NHL is better and more consistent than the information you get in the AHL, which is better and more consistent than the information you get in the CHL, which is better and more consistent than the information you get in the USHL, and so forth, all the way down to high school hockey. So they're a prisoner to the information they get. They're a prisoner into how we can present it. So as you said, they have their position and their impact on the list. I'm not going to say how much, I'm not going to say where, but it's, as I said, it varies depending on their information, depending on the circumstance, depending on information they can't discern. It's hard for them to quantify intangibles of character. So, as I said, they are involved in each step of the draft process, just like the scouts. The scouts are involved in the movement process. Like the scouts are like, "Oof, you better not move back and lose this guy." So there's a give and take where certain times analytics will come to the fore. As I said, it's more in procedure, but it's certainly something in terms of the list and the placement too. It's less consistent depending on their information.
Backtracking to the Woolley move up, you said, theoretically, if you traded down or if you hadn't traded up in that situation, that it would quote unquote be the wrong move to trade up because you're losing value. I'm assuming that the value lost is lower in the 6th and 7th rounds than it is in the 1st and 2nd, right? Like it's safer to move up in the later rounds because what did you say it was 2.7% chance of a 7th round pick making it?
Yeah, all picks, that? As I said, as the picks seem to normalize, like the 196 pick is not much different than the 187th pick, but the 5th pick is vastly different than the 10th pick. So again, if people want to do this, the easiest way to do is to go look at Shucker's draft model, where he just assigns 1,000 points to the first pick, and then it goes all the way down to whatever it is in the 7th round, like 47th. I haven't used it in a long time, but that's a way to get that for anyone who wants to get into it. That's the easiest way. It just assigns a number. It was I think he might have been the first guy to do it way back when, and it's just an easily digestible thing. So you can, if you want to see what a pick is worth, that's not a bad place to start. It's public information that's readily available to anybody who wants to look at it. So. But as I said, that's it in a vacuum. There's so many other scenarios. Like as you said, if you're trading up for a pick, if you're trading up for the 150th pick in the draft, but your guy's 14th,
right?
You're trading up for the 14th guy. You're not trading up for the 160th. So there's nuance into it that way. And then, as I said, the analytics guys would tell you that Woolley might have been there if we didn't move up. It's one of those straight. Who knows? The only way to do it is not to move up and find out. As I said, I've done that. We did it with Hellenbuck. We waited, and he was right around where we thought we would get him. We just didn't move up, and he went just a little bit before, and now he's not on our team. He's on someone else's. So. I wish I'd moved up then. So as I said, it's nothing happens in a vacuum. maybe Woolley would have been available and we could have picked someone else who could have played. Maybe he would have been gone, and now, now I get the pitchforks and the burning torches coming to the castle because we didn't get Woolley. So each situation is different. Each situation has context and subtext and nuance. At that time, the emotion or the subjective stuff overruled the analytics, but in other times, the analytics have overruled that. There were plenty of times we didn't move last year and this year. We're like, oh, we better move. We're not going to get this guy. We're not going to get this guy. Like there were people who would tell there were scouts who want us to move up to get George. So the same argument that we did move up to get Woolley, we didn't move up to get George because I felt more confident. And again, there were other players there too that still have held their similar value. So it happens both ways.
Without spilling any details, and this is the last one I got for you, has a different team ever reached out to you and just blind read your list perfectly? Have they ever reached out to you and said, listen, we know you're targeting this player, but we either don't want him, so we'll swap with you, or we know you want this guy and we have the pick, so we'll swap with you so that you can get him? Like, has anybody ever just come at you with information that actually surprised you at how accurate it was?
I don't know if I'd say like we were when we picked Shen, Phoenix, Gretzky, and Roots was with them then. Christian Roots was with them. So we had a relation, especially Fuda, but there was a relationship with Ruutu and Gretzky. As I said, a little more so with Mike because he's just a little bit more personable, a little more dynamic, a little bit easier to be friends with. But certainly both of us. Certainly was a four-way friendship. And they had a very good idea we were going to take Shen. They really wanted Ekman Larson. They were a little concerned that we would take Ekman Larson, but they passed us a note, and they had our order. There were 3 players. They had our order right. But it was also like hopeful. So, and again, Fuda and Lee Cowens, and I, when you go to the draft, you have a bunch of name tags just in case things go wrong. So no, I don't know if anybody knows this. So Fuda and I and Lee put Ekman Larson on the back of the jersey and just flashed it to Keith and Roots. Roots didn't buy it. I know that for a fact. Roots didn't buy it, but Keith bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then I said, we can't keep it. We're not telling you, but this, and then we went up and picked Shen. So they had the idea right. And I said, it's so rare. That's the only time I can think of it in 15 plus years. But it's very, as I said, it's just not a scenario where it's just not something that's done. I don't know. It's just not something that's been done to me. So I can't comment on it. That's literally the only time I can ever remember anybody asking, showing, or even being in that situation.
That raises a whole slew of sliding doors questions. Like would Ekman Larson have been packaged with Simmons to get Mike Richards? I'm gonna bring that up to Hoven. We're gonna spend a year talking about it. Mark Yannetti, thank you so much for joining me as always. Really appreciate it.
Sure, a lot of fun.